Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camel's Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference Camels can make in your life. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news. We read this week in the Washington Post that the Earth has breached a feared level of warming over the past year, and they ask, are we doomed? And of course, the answer is yes, we are doomed. In 2015, the nations of the world assembled in Paris and agreed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the arbitrarily chosen point of 1850. The reason that we're doomed is not because we passed this imaginary line, but because the last 9 years of catastrophic climate change have demonstrated conclusively that the international community is simply incapable of accomplishing any goals. Instead of achieving any reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, we find ourselves in a world at war. Our answer to the refugee crisis, the hunger crisis, the ongoing genocides, the pandemic has been increased violence and polarization. On the one side of this polarization, you have Russia, China, Iran, and the Republican Party. And on the other side, you have NATO, EU, and the Democrats. If we have learned anything from last week's news, it is that Donald Trump controls the Congress. This week, he single-handedly brought down the most consequential bill presented to Congress this year. The bill would have marked the first substantial legislative effort to deal with the immigration problem at our border, while also funding to sustain the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Wars are expensive. They also represent great opportunities to spend money. We gave Israel $3.8 billion in military aid last year, but with the onset of the Gaza war, the administration asked for an emergency allocation of $14.1 billion. Some political genius said that you never want to waste a crisis. And let's not forget the $60 billion for Ukraine. Speaking of Ukraine, we are in the third year of that war, and Masha Gessen writes in the New Yorker about what Ukraine has already lost, including 6 million of its population who are either internally or externally displaced. They're either in Russia or Russian-controlled territory, or they're refugees scattered abroad. In a very detailed and utterly depressing article, Gessen explains that Ukraine has already lost the war. We all have. Ukraine, after all, was the breadbasket for much of the world, and there is no end in sight. And in Gaza, the Israeli War Cabinet Minister Gadi Eisenkot, a former IDF chief of staff and currently a member of Benny Gantz's Kahol Lavan party, and a member of the War Cabinet, last week he said the Gaza war is unwinnable. He said that the only way to bring the hostages home was to negotiate with Hamas, to have a ceasefire. He said that Netanyahu is peddling delusions of victory. He said that it's not possible for Israel to destroy Hamas. And so there is no end in sight, either in Ukraine or in Gaza. Last week, I mentioned an article in Haaretz about Israelis who are putting their lives at risk in order to escort Palestinian shepherds who are being attacked regularly and in a coordinated policy of ethnic cleansing. The idea is to drive the shepherds and their sheep out of their traditional grazing grounds. Quote, about once a week, Netta Ben-Porat leaves her home in Jerusalem and heads out to the Palestinian shepherds. She spreads a keffiyeh on the dashboard of her car and hangs the Muslim prayer beads from her window, from her mirror. A Palestinian flag, which she has hidden in her glove compartment, comes out and she throws that out too. So, and with these trappings, she hopes that the Palestinians in the West Bank, where she's driving, will understand that she is not she's on their side. She's not an enemy. And she says that it makes her feel a little safer driving in these areas. But as soon as she gets out of the car, there is the fear of the settlers who truly have no limits, she said. They've already tried to kill me once. So the question is, why does she risk her life? What does she believe that she can accomplish? She doesn't. So here, so that they asked her, what do your children know about what you do? So they know that police officers hit me. They know that mom was beaten by settlers. They know that I stand with the Palestinians. They know and feel the ricochet from what I do in their social lives. I found that true with my son, Isaac. My activism made his life difficult. What keeps you going after all the attacks? And she replied, I feel truly terrible guilt. In the name of my security, we are inflicting terrible wrongs on innocent people, simple people. We are destroying communities. Almost everyone I accompanied no longer lives in the places where I met with them. We are destroying an entire culture systematically and rapidly, finishing these people off. And I'm funding it. I earn a lot of money, and this is what my taxes pay for. Everyone is mobilized for this purpose: the police, the soldiers, the judicial system, and the state prosecution and the judges. This is the country. This is me. Do you feel that your activities bring about change? A change in the fact that we are destroying communities and culture? No. Sometimes it delays things a little bit, makes Palestinians feel a little bit more secure. But no, we are a few and we are standing against the state of Israel. But I can't do otherwise. On October the 6th, she was out again with her shepherds in the West Bank. And then the next day, her thoughts obviously turned to her friends along the communities along the Gaza Strip that were under attack by Hamas. At the personal level, it took me time to grasp things. I was paralyzed, she said. But gradually, the reports started to reach her about the surge of violent incidents and the raids on homes and threatening encounters on the West Bank, and she decided to go out and accompany her locals again. I don't do it out of pity or because I love Palestinians, she said. I do it because it's hard for me to accept what we Israelis are doing. It's hard for me to accept what has become of us. And I would add that it's hard for all of us to accept what has become of us. Innocent people are being brutalized on our borders in our name by our government to keep us safe. We make deals with the Republicans and choose to close our borders in exchange for money to fund two wars. After all, we're fighting against Putin and Hamas. It's good versus evil, right? And last week, almost a decade after the ISIS perpetrated the genocide against the Yazidi, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Center and for the Prevention of Genocide hosted an exhibit and discussion entitled Nobody's Listening, Supporting Yazidi Communities 10 Years After the Genocide. And it's the same story that Masha Gessen was writing about Ukraine. They already have lost their homeland. The situation in Iraq is extremely dangerous for Yazidi, and basically nobody's listening. Most of the population now are refugees. Of course, this was the situation for the Jews 10 years after the Holocaust. In fact, in 1966, when I took the first course ever taught in a college on the Holocaust, taught by Rabbi Irving Greenberg, the course was titled Totalitarianism in the 20th Century. The course title was a compromise because there was resistance to having a course titled simply The Holocaust. Many people opposed such a course altogether, and they argued that universities would look askance at a course titled The Holocaust. They, especially because no other university institution was in the world taught such a course. Before the blockbuster four-part NBC special, The Holocaust, which aired in 1978, the subject was almost completely out of the public view. There were no Holocaust museums anywhere but in Jerusalem, where Yad Vashem had been established in 1956. So it comes as no surprise that 10 years after the Yazidi genocide, no one is listening. Of course, last week we got the terrible news that we have passed the 1.5-degree line, which we were told could spell our doom. Unfortunately, no one is listening. Well, my friends, that'll have to do for this week. Stay safe, and if you're still around, and if I'm still around, if we have made it through this week, I'll be back next Sunday with another edition of More Bad News.